All right, so we got some special guests here today. I'm very honored
Adam.
to be doing this conversation. We've got Neema from Cannabiotics and Autumn Shelton of Autumn Brands. So please give it up.
Casino
Make some
Bambino
noise.
for you.
These are two brands that have been around for a long time. I've lived here a little bit over 6 years, and I can remember one of the first eights I ever bought was actually Autumn Brands. So that's real shit. But yeah, welcome Autumn. Go ahead and come on the stage. We'll give her a round of applause there. Make some noise. Let's go. And Neema, Cannabiotics, coming in with some big nugs. Adam Ill's next big blunt, sponsored by Cannabiotics.
Hey, what's up, my guy?
Appreciate you guys. All right, everybody. So we're gonna be hanging out here for a little while. You guys are all welcome to join, light up, smoke. At some point, I'm gonna light up a hash hole. So, do your thing.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining here today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We've got a conversation about top shelf cultivation today. We've got two different growing styles, pretty different from each other. Both of you guys have a history of building brands, a history of growing high quality top shelf cannabis, and so thank you guys again. Let's talk a little bit about cultivating top shelf cannabis. What does that realistically mean? What does that mean to you guys individually? When you guys think of top shelf weed, what is that realistically? We'll start ladies first, of course. Autumn.
For me, that means cannabis looks amazing, smells intoxicating, tastes delicious, and it burns smoothly. So to start at the top, to look amazing, you really need to have skilled trimmers that know every single one of your genetics and how to make that perfect nug so that they don't take away those incredible trichomes. Smell, that starts in the greenhouse and your growing practices, to curing and really making sure that bud really stays cured as long as it needs to. That then moves to your palate, that really takes in that aroma that you've really cured and brought to that bud. And then as far as like a smooth smoke, people talk about that flushing out the nutrients is really where you get that. But we strongly believe by not spraying any pesticides, including organic pesticides, that's really where you get that smooth smoke. And that's what makes top shelf cannabis.
I love to hear that perspective because you ask enough people what they like about weed, and the answer is drastically different over time. As someone who's reviewed weed without there being any form of structure when I started, you have to just think about what's important to you and kind of build a baseline. And from the cultivation side, I think it's incredibly important to hear these different perspectives on what you guys actually view it, because it's art and what you guys put into it is its own unique element, and passion, time, costs, all these different things. And it's quite expensive to be a legal weed company. So the time and effort you put into it is huge. Neema, you guys are one of the best known, most popular brands in the premium indoor top shelf space.
Thank you,
what qualifies, that top shelf for you? How do you guys QC that with y'all?
Well, I think over at Cannabiotics, one of the first things that we always kind of recognize and marvel at is the uniqueness of tree in the sense of how many palatizable elements it really has compared to everything else out there that people consume in one way or another, right? So I really hate using this analog because it doesn't really speak to me as someone who's been smoking weed every day for 25 years. But if you look at, let's say, something like wine, right? They pour out the wine, you look at its clarity, you spin it around, you give a smell to the aroma, you taste it for its flavor hints, right? And then, of course, the fourth element is the effect, which is always the same, right? When you take ganj, first off, right, if you're growing indoor, we always like to take a look at the nug formation, right? We kind of think about just in general what people expect when they're paying this much for our products. And we try to put ourselves and utilize empathy to be in the customer's shoes, because I'll tell you, if I was to pay $60 or $65 an eighth, it would have to be God's gift to mankind. And so we try to put that forward into our training and SOPs, and we're fortunate to have such continuity and a great team. But back to what composes fire according to our standards. Nug formation, one, right? You don't want it to be too airy or foxtaily as an indoor grower. That just doesn't really make sense, right? So it's okay for it to not just be super rock dense, but you obviously don't want it to have that wild flower look, right?
Yeah.
I'd say, secondly, one of the things that we always do is before we even open the bag on a pheno hunt, we look at the Ziploc itself and we look if there's crystals stuck to the inside of the bag, right?
Yeah.
The crystallization is key for us, and I think Autumn touched on that's directly related to how you're manicuring the flower, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We
absolutely.
don't believe that fire should have what we call matted crystals. You know, super kill tree should have like that blood diamond, big crystal glisten to it, right? I think, thirdly, right, it's the resin factor. Where we grew up in LA, you don't have the most crypt bag unless that shit's gonna stick to the window and shit, you know?
Yeah.
So the touch test is important to us, right?
Yeah.
We always try to like touch the bud and see if it sticks on the lift, right? That way we know it's got the stickiness checked. And then I think once we open the bag, we try to always gauge aroma to like a slang term we call trunk funk or jail weed. It should be the case that if I open that bag in the room, everybody in the room can smell that shit. Right. And if
that's
it's
that's a great checkpoint right there.
yeah, that
to
that
determine
is-
if it's good enough. I love
exact-
that.
or in the car, you know what I'm saying?
Facts.
Yeah. And then I think you move on to effect and how it smokes and the flavor of the inhale and the exhale. And lastly, I think also when you're analyzing a bud aesthetically, one of the things we pay attention to is the dichotomy or trichotomy of the hues, right? The ways people find something to be attractive to the eye, and obviously when you're selling ganj in the legal market, when people go to evaluate the tree before they make the purchase, mainly what they can do is look and smell, right? So we really try to pay attention to the hue of the green and the actual colas and nugget parts of the bud, as well as that dichotomy between the sugar leaves that are manicured and how they kind of powwow against the nuclear lime green of the bud. And then lastly, how electric are the hairs, you know?
Okay.
We feel like that combination, when it's really nuclear and bright, is more appealing for sale. And obviously it varies on the hues based on strain.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's important, everybody, for us to get an understanding of what two of the largest, most popular, some of the brands that have been around for a duration of time, what they determine as quality, because we as customers don't really understand that at the highest level. We have our own opinion, but they're all growing their own art. They're all making their own products with their own things, their own unique sense of magic. And so I wanted to start with getting a good idea of what you guys deem as top shelf cultivation. This is the cultivation panel. So let's figure out exactly what that looks like. Now, back to you, Autumn, here. Let's talk about cultivation and scaling that, right? Greenhouse is significantly different than indoor.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, we're all kind of dabbling in similar genetics here in California. What the customers want is what they want. How have you been able to adapt over time from where we first connected in 2019 and 2020 with my team being there, filming a video, to all this candy and all this permanent marker and all these other crazy genetics that have since come around? How have you guys been able to adapt and grow at scale within your cultivation with these different trends?
Yeah, I think, well, we've definitely learned a lot over the years, and looking at what people really want. I think in the very beginning years, it was much more indica focused, but we always stayed true to having sativas. And so really listening to what was popular. But the most important thing was we don't have in-house genetics or being able to do it ourselves. And so really being able to find the right partners and the right nursery
Yeah.
that we can work with, that one works with our zero pesticide, promise, but also that really can provide us with top quality genetics. Being a zero pesticide free farm, we can only grow genetics that do work within our greenhouses and within our environment. That's really key.
Yep.
Because we don't have certain tools that others might utilize instead. But that's really where we've kind of come about with genetics, to be able to really listen, one, to the consumer, and two, having a team in place as well that really understands what we should and shouldn't grow. But at this point, we still grow about 60 different strains.
Wow.
And a lot of them are in R&D, and we really spent a lot of time with those clones figuring out which ones do grow well in our system, but also are top sellers.
That's huge. Interesting to hear still that many was keeping stuff around for a period of time while also adapting to the trends and this balance of that scale, what sells the fastest, what stores are paying, with the timelines of all these different things, kind of, and how the variables play together.
And we've currently, since we've started, have had 5.5 acres of cultivation, and
Wow.
we just are in the process right now of scaling up to 9.5 acres of cultivation. So really being prepared for that as well.
From large to even larger.
Yes, it's daunting but very exciting at this time.
How
but
cool is
we're
that?
really we're excited to start trying out some new genetics
Yeah.
in this new part of the property.
That's going to be exciting. You know, I remember seeing the video that my team created there years ago and being like, damn, I missed out on one of the biggest opportunities to see, you know, true agriculture in this historical area of agriculture coming to life. And I still vicariously live through that video when I go into our drive and check it out. Switching over to Neema, you guys, I visited the grow. I forget what city in LA is, but I know it's in LA.
Yeah, right by Bell Gardens.
Yep, Bell Gardens. I didn't want to get the Bell City wrong.
Yep.
But being there, I was so impressed because there were some things there that I'd never seen before. And then fast forward, I believe this is 5 years later now at this point. You guys are 2014 to now. I believe there's been a variety of genetics that have sticked around, some new stuff recently, some different SKUs, edible brands, just a bunch of different things you guys have been working on. When you talk about cultivation at scale, how have you guys been able to build out that indoor facility there and then grow to this monster of a brand you guys have from the indoor perspective?
So I think, you know, one of the things that we have always done since 2010, even before the inception of our brand, is we've had our own internal breeding program, right? And we've always kind of been known as flavor savers. So we had the really fortunate kind of stroke of luck that we had been stacking up genetics that myself and my partner had been getting from the older guys that were teaching us the foundation of our own natural growing techniques that they had been growing for 20, 30 years. Stuff like Super Silver Haze and Durban Poison and Pre-98 Bubba. And so we always kept an off-site veg room and kept those genetics restarted. Okay. So when we started our in-house breeding program, we had quite the library as a foundation. And then we kind of took newer school hybrids like Girl Scout cookies and all the OGs and combined them with old school stuff.
Okay.
And over time, we've kind of just really, I think, Autumn touched on something which is completely true. In this state, they prefer indicas. But as we've kept the internal breeding program going, we've really started to grow a little something for everybody, right? As long as it kind of follows that seven-step analysis. And I think for growing at scale, that's also come boomeranged around to help us in the sense of our no PGR, zero pesticide, natural indoor growing techniques. Because, you know, one of the things we believe in is you don't need to spray your canopy at all if you never introduce the problem. So by us not having to open that door of risk, and because we're always doing our own pollinations, germinations, hunting things from seeds, selections, and keeping that internal flavor wheel going, we really protect and keep our canopy insulated from any outside threats. And that's kind of like what you saw, some of the things you had never seen at other facilities. Those are preventative measures that we make everybody that goes around the plants follow, again, under the philosophy of you don't have to deal with the problem and the whole headache basket if you never introduce it.
I have been to a ton of grows. I've been in a bunch of different states. We did tour this last year, went to 27 places. We went into 40, 50 places. The SOPs were so different everywhere. Yeah. And I don't ever say it when I'm there in person, but I can't help but cringe or laugh or turn to my person and be like, I'm kind of surprised that they deliver the quality this consistently sometimes because of the risk. And it's not like we are breaking some of the protocols. Don't visit 2 grows in a day, these kind of things. But like, to not even mention it or ask or just rely on alcohol sprays is kind of crazy, to be real.
Insane.
And your blowing machine that blows. I was in like Star Wars
the air shower. Yeah.
I have now been in facilities where that's all over the place.
Yeah.
But that was the first going back 5 years ago. Right?
And we kicked that off in our Nevada facility back in 2015.
Yeah, see, that kind of stuff is huge. I wanted to go back to you, Autumn, because I've got some questions about the zero pesticides and some of the different SOPs that you've been able to do because your environment is different. In some ways, not in some ways, scientifically, it's almost less controlled than an indoor space.
Yes.
And I'm not a cultivator, so that's why I say that kind of cautiously. But I'm interested in how you guys have been able to, at scale, keep moisture and water content and some of these things because you're growing, so you've had to have it under control for the 5 acres. But then to go to another 4, it's like those things have to be dialed in. So how have you been able to do that? What does that look like? Can you kind of help us understand those nitty-gritty cultivation details?
Absolutely. First, I'd like to say I didn't know you were zero pesticides, so you have my heart. I am so stoked.
Of course.
Let's go. Can we make some noise for brands that do zero pesticides?
Likewise.
If you love clean weed,
Likewise.
let's just appreciate it. And a great time here for you to light a joint, spark up a hash roll, take a dab.
There's some ethics in cultivation
Let's
up
go.
here, I see. I like it.
Come on, man. It's important. I come from Washington. Washington has been real big on clean weed for a long time. And so I really appreciate that. I also did not know that, so that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So, yeah, for us, we can't keep a perfectly clean environment in, like an enclosed building like you could an indoor within a greenhouse. But back in 2017, fall of 2017, my partner came to me and said, I have a crazy idea. I want to stop spraying all pesticides. All I've ever known was an IPM program. We came from cut flowers. He's like, but I'm hearing things out of Holland that even organic pesticides are harmful when you heat it up. I mean, we can wash our fruits and vegetables, but we can't wash our weed, right? So we made the choice to stop buying pesticides, bought a boatload of beneficial insects, and tried it out. And then when an outbreak happened, we said, oh shit, no, we have to spray. And our grower said, just wait. And so we did. And sure enough, those beneficial insects that we bought in and native ladybugs that don't have any spots that you cannot commercially buy also found their way in and ate their hearts out. And we knew we had something. Now, it wasn't all perfect from the beginning, but we still threw out tens of thousands of plants and probably lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the very beginning trying to figure this out. But what we found out was we could do it. And now we've created this perfect ecosystem. And so some of the key things that you don't know when you have an IPM program is actually when you spray pesticides, even organic pesticides, you're raising the humidity. So you actually lose a day of growing
It's still
each
moisture.
week. It's still moisture.
Yep.
Right? So we saw that much of a benefit. I'm not spending money on pesticides anymore either. So that's huge. But the most important thing is, don't just focus on creating an environment for your plants, but focus on creating an environment for your beneficial bugs. Because those multi-generational bugs really are going to do the work for you and make an incredible ecosystem. So this is what's been really important for us in an environment where we're not fully sealed in, where we can't allow the introduction. We're actually allowing the natural function of what these bad bugs and good bugs do. Now, there's certain bugs like russet mites that you can't actually use beneficials for. So you just need to have strict SOPs. So russet mites, how do they move? Through wind, on people's clothing. So you don't walk through those plants. You don't have any high fans or wind going through them. You block it off. You take out the plants that maybe are damaged, or you let it run its course and it's okay. So there's different ways that we've learned over the years to really be able to work with this in a natural way, which has been pretty incredible.
It sounds to me like there's like general core farming practices still happening here that maybe cannabis people kind of make a little bit too difficult sometimes because they just want to rely on these old school practices of just, the pesticide management kind of thing, just using those things.
And my partners they're multi-generational farmers. They've been doing this for a very long time.
With different problems for a while, and especially in that region specifically.
Yeah.
Now, Neema, back to your on the zero pesticides. Let's key in on that. I don't know how many people really knew about that, right? And so talk a little bit about or elaborate and share more detail on some of those SOPs, some of those
Sure.
processes.
Yeah. So you said russet mites, and I almost had a heart attack. By the way, I haven't heard that one in a while. We keep away from those, the heebie-jeebies. Yeah. So I think when my partner Iran and I kind of were growing up and got into like selling weed and growing weed in general, we always did it to have some of our own head stash and obviously be able to sell some to have some extra money. So when we were learning the foundations of the cultivation techniques that have now become the cannabinoids methods that we teach to our entire Grow Academy, the basis of that was always born in natural techniques because we were never going to, poison our own canopy and then dry it and smoke it ourselves.
Absolutely.
Nobody would like give themselves cancer, right? So, I think, or hopefully, and then I think, one of the things that I think just really needs to be highlighted is sometimes there is a portion of, I feel like the grow sector of this market that just doesn't really invest a lot of time into progression and evolution and researching and doing experimentation on new techniques, right? It's a lot of complaining about what's going on in the environment and the market. It's not a lot of inwards focusing on how do I improve my technique, sharpen my sword harder, right? For us at Cannabiotics, we're looking to grow every round at 11 out of 10 quality, right? Like a surfer that's always searching for the perfect wave. We're always searching for that perfect round after round of every single strain in every grow room being grown to top potential, right? Now, we do use bennies, and there's other things that we do that I can't really reveal, right? Because to be honest with you, in the last couple of years, we've almost woken up to like, wow, this is still a thing. Like, people are still using pesticides and stuff like that, even in the legal market, and when there's labs and
Even when we're supposed to trust it happening properly, it seems that it's not happening in a trustworthy fashion.
Right, right. So, and I think, one of the things that we do, and we try to think about things when we grow our plants, every strain, that push their plant immunity to the maximum. And through our experience, we know how to make certain observational reads and take certain measurements throughout our growth process and within our canopies that give us indicators that the plant's immunity is at top level, right? So it's very similar to, obviously in the last 4 or 5 years, there seems to be a health transparency renaissance, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
The people that take care of their immune systems and go the extra mile and put that sea moss gel in their smoothies and take care of themselves, they can go out and expose and attend these events and smoke joints, and they don't get sick, right? So we adopt some of those same philosophies to pushing our plant immunities to max level, never introducing our problem. They already have a force field around them, utilizing bennies and things like that, and other techniques, and that symphony comes together to make sure that we're always growing the cleanest and greenest out there, right? And we don't use PGRs either. We have never needed to kind of mess with the hormonal balance of the plant in order to trigger yields, right? So, I think the last thing I'm going to say is, in general, if you're producing something that people consume, you kind of have an elevated duty, right, to ensure that you're presenting it in a way that's safe for their lungs, or if they're ingesting it, etc. And that's kind of one of the things we always thought comes along with being a weed grower.
Do you have something you'd like to add?
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like, we stopped growing or we stopped using pesticides, but nobody really, some people cared, but not everyone paid attention. 100%. So we didn't really talk about it, as openly as we are maybe right now that it's a little more public. But I feel like that's just because people smoked cannabis for decades and decades with full of pesticides and heavy metals, and it was never tested or regulated.
Don't care, didn't know it was a problem.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And so I think people even today are kind of like, they just kind of go with whatever the status quo. So
Yeah.
unless we are being innovative, we are doing better, we are providing a better product, an option to these people, to the consumer,
Agreed.
then they're just going to go with the status quo. So it is up to us
Yeah.
to make this change.
I think it goes without saying that your company, a certain style of growing, indoor flower versus outdoor, whatever the stigma, whatever people's biases are, whatever their preference is. Some point or another, I saw you guys in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stores. That's a successful way to do it. So grow greenhouse, grow outside. There's a demand for it, and there's growth opportunities there. And doing it with no pesticides and doing it that way can be done, and it can be done at scale, right? Indoor can be done the same way, obviously not the same growing style, but can be done the same way with the same commitment to that. And it is now a popular thing. It has become a buzzword, and it's so bullshit that it's become a buzzword, and we can't trust it now because of the bad actors. So I want to shout out one of my sponsors on one of my podcasts is Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs. They are a testing lab that's not paying for me to say this. This is out of the bottom of my heart. Somebody that like shows up and lobbies for these things and is advocating for that and was a part of that scandal in July with all the labs and the pesticides and all that kind of stuff. We want to be able to trust it, so we should be supporting groups like this. Spend your money with the right company. Spend your money with people that are doing it right. And shout out to you guys for doing it right. I want to circle back because as I learn about all these things, and I don't know you guys personally very well or your backgrounds, a bio does not do it justice. But I hear you guys talk so passionately about these things that are quite scientific, that took a lot of money. There's technology involved. There's this whole level of agriculture involved. Again, back to you, Autumn. Can you tell the people a little bit about your background and how Autumn Brands came about? Because I'm aware of these things, but there might just be some general fans here or some buyers here that have no clue. And maybe they just want to support you because they like, what you guys are all about.
Sure. So Autumn Brands is two families that own and operate the business every single day. I'm Autumn, and then my three partners, Hans, Hannah, and Johnny, their last name is Brand. So we are Autumn Brands together.
That's awesome. I did not know that. That's hilarious.
We were originally Calyx Farms, but then everyone was becoming Calyx something, so we decided to be something a little more unique. My partner, Hans, has owned his property for over 30 years. Like I said, multi-generational cut flower grower from Holland. So he was growing cut flowers before that, Gerber daisies, tulips, whatnot. I worked for him in that business. He got an opportunity to lease out some greenhouses for medical marijuana back in 2015 to somebody else, and became partners with them. Was not a great fit. We were going to shut down all the cut flowers. He said, "Why don't we start something?" And I said, "Okay." So immediately started drawing up a business plan, and let's go. His kids were going to be graduating from college a few years later, and he wanted them also to be part of it when they did. And so the four of us joined forces back in Prop 215 days, and then transitioned into 2018 regulated markets, started the brand that year, and it's been an incredible journey ever since.
That eighth that I was telling you I bought when I introed you was in 2019 in February when I moved here, right after a viral video. Shout out the Pot Brothers at Law. And that was a vivid memory of buying it over there off Wilshire at a little dispensary in a gas station. Neema, similar question for you. How does all this science and expertise and the understanding of these ecosystems, where does that come from? What were you up to?
So, Cannabiotics, I founded Cannabiotics back in 2014. It's co-owned by myself and my best friend from home, Iran. And we got a lot of our buddies, thank God, from back home working for us. And a kick-ass team. But I grew up in Santa Monica, kind of surfing and skating, and so at a young age, I had a lot of older buddies that were either selling tree or growing little small 4-lighters, closet ops, things like that. So we were just kind of exposed to it a lot early on, and it's really kind of part of the lifestyle back in Santa Monica. Like, your substitute teacher smokes herb, your friends' parents who are psychologists smoke weed, things like that all over the place. So, I think I was fortunate to be kind of exposed to it early on, and I first started selling weed back when I was 15. kind of to make my own bread and have some head stash on deck to smoke at all times without it coming out of my pocket. And so I sold weed till I was about 20. Went to USC. Kind of my whole game plan was to just, join a frat house and start selling to every other frat house and then every frat
Smart
house
business
at every
model.
college.
Reoccurring revenue.
Yeah. And then, I kind of was the financier at first of grow operations. So I had guys that said they knew how to grow, and I was trying to, I was sending drivers to NorCal all the time, and when it wasn't me, I'd get slid in like 30 bows of last year's crop. And obviously, that can boil down after a couple boxes to be your profits.
Absolutely.
So I kind of got tired of the bait and switch maneuvers and wanted to internalize some of the supply I needed to serve fulls. So I started out bankrolling grow operations, home grows, right, with guys that said they knew how to grow. I put up all the chips, last month's rent, next couple months' rent, power bills, hydro setup, all that. Once the harvest gets down, split it 50-50. Well, I set up 4 of those in like 9 months, and
Wow.
3 of them took L's. One guy broke the 10 commandments, which is never tell anybody 1 through 10. And of course it got robbed. Another setup, right when we finished it, the landlord was like, "Oh, I need an appraisal inspection to come through before we even pulled the first harvest." And
Wow.
the last spot, there was a power issue that made it incapable for us to actually pull it off there, and we couldn't figure it out. So I ended up taking over the last of the Mohicans of those grow operations, because at that point I had taken quite a monetary L and needed it to go well. And then kind of just started to really get going and fall in love with it and do a bunch of experiments. And that's really kind of where the cannabinotics technique was born from. Back then, we did about 497 side-by-side experiments, I'd say, over the next 10 years. And so that would be, we would keep strain logs, and we would do experiments, obviously using scientific control, and we would test things anywhere from, when to structure and clean up the plants, how often to feed them, at what duration, do the OG types like more CalMag during this period, and tweaking the nutrient formula, all that stuff. And that's really where the technique was kind of born out of. Was really fortunate to learn from a lot of old school, really talented growers, particularly indoor growers in my early days, and kind of taking that technique and then reading papers out of grad student thesis, UC Davis agricultural programs and things like that, and putting that all together in kind of a progressive evolution and always trying to improve the technique.
One of the things that I feel a lot of different groups that I go into around the country from a cultivation standard, all these massive facilities from the MSOs to, we went into this facility in New Jersey, you guys, 144,000 square feet. It used to do tanks in World War II and Mack trucks in the 80s, and it still smelled like both in the facility. Imagine trying to build things out like that, right? It's these unique situations, but I think about the importance of plant nutrition, and we've got a unique situation with a certain recipe for you, and we've got another situation for indoor, and each genetics have their own situations that make sense. When I think about plant nutrition, I did something I don't understand because your boy struggles with his own plant nutrition and my addiction to teriyaki, and so I think about, my question for you here, Autumn, is what is the role of plant nutrition? How have you guys figured out your sauce? Can you elaborate and kind of help us understand what goes into that part of your guys' cultivation experience?
Well, I am actually not the one with the green thumb in my partnership, so we do definitely divide and conquer. But we grow hydroponically. Plant nutrients is very key in finding out the right recipe. My partners definitely don't like to share their special sauce. I try to listen in too, but
Absolutely.
they give me, and then it just goes in one ear and out the other. But for us, it's definitely just making sure that we have a balanced ecosystem, utilizing technology and automation to ensure that all the light, all the watering, everything is consistent.
All cohesive with
all
each other.
cohesive.
Yep.
So that starts in the nursery, utilizing pressure water systems, anything that we can that really is automated to make sure that even like the plants, everything has to be spread apart exactly the same way. The lights have to be situated exactly the same way in the nursery.
We're looking for uniformity in those areas.
Yes.
Awesome. And Neema, similar thing for you guys. I mean, it's a different situation for y'all. I've been in tons of indoor facilities, and there's a ton of different ways to produce fireweed. A lot of people rely on some of the more popular classic nutrients. A lot of people will say that they're their own cook in the kitchen. They got their secret sauce. Obviously, you're not one to share all the details, as we've already run into that a little bit here. But how important is that? What can you talk about? What are you willing to share in terms of plant nutrition with the role of your fireweed?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, in general, when it comes down to feeding plants, right? They all need a balance of micro and macro nutritional elements. And I think for us, one of the things that we try to do is read the plant observational reads. And I think the part that needs to come before that is, part of what we do within our cultivation team at Cannabiotics is, we always put a big emphasis on scouting and being and living in your canopies and constantly checking on them, right? And that helps you see anomalies and things when you grow new strains that give you the observational reads that might then trigger you to conduct experiments to dial in the nutrient formula needed for that particular strain, right? And then there's certain signs that you can read early on within the leaf matter of the plants, how they present themselves, their perk, etc., the stalk color of the plants, things like that, that can give you kind of hunches and cues on how that imbalance of micro and macro elements might need to be adjusted for that particular strain, or in general, the canopy that you're scouting and observing. And I think we like to combine that then with actual scientific tool reads and measurements that we take off of those plants and in the canopy to then affirm our hunches and know kind of the first couple things we likely have to experiment with to get this plant what it needs fertilizer-wise and dial it in. And then I think another thing that we do from our days of growing, we had a 50-acre farm in Grass Valley for about 7 years. So in our days of growing outdoor in greenhouse, we did a lot of experiments with compost tea.
Okay.
So one thing that
I've seen that a lot all over the place.
And one thing I can say is that, that's critical, right? Because uptake of the plant relies on a thriving root zone, and sometimes that root zone needs to be revitalized, and compost tea recipes can be phenomenal for that, right? So, we brew different recipes that we feed all the plants within our grow rooms manually based off of what step in the cycle they're in, early veg, mid-veg, early flower, mid-flower, things like that. And I think that kind of also helps kind of with the uptake and general kind of thriving of the plants.
Yeah, I could, definitely in our system and at scale, there's no way we'd be able to, per genetic, be able to give certain nutrients to one versus the other. We also, we are planting every single day, 5 days a week. And so, really being able to have small batches of different genetics has been really key for us to be able to keep the consistency. And
kind of keeping them within families of each other, so to speak?
Yes.
Like similarities?
Yeah.
Chunking them up and organizing that way. Now that's super cool. So I have two more categories of questions for you guys. One's on testing, because the importance of testing and the role of that in cultivation. I think that's important because there's this balance of retail, there's this balance of this THC, there's this balance of the labs and all that stuff. So I want to touch on that, and then I also want to end it on some of the products that you guys have, some of the things you're excited about. We're in a new year, we're at the end of Q1. What do we got the rest of the year? So before we get to the products and brands and what you guys are doing here at the show, let's talk a little bit of testing, the technology, all that kind of stuff that goes into you guys growing. How does the role of testing really play into you guys' cultivation skills? Is that something you guys think about? Are we searching for genetics with high THC? Or do we not care about that as much? Are we kind of rebelling against what these retailers and customers are either asking for, or whether they like it or not? What is the role in that for you guys? Does it matter at all, or what are your thoughts there?
Sure. Well, first I want to just kind of touch on on pesticides one more time
Fine.
here,
Yeah,
and
perfect.
just the understanding of zero pesticides versus people who say pesticide free, because pesticide free still means they're spraying organic pesticides. So there's definitely still a difference there.
Okay.
And I think there's still a lot of consumer
Yeah,
confusion
let's
on
let's
what
go
that
ahead and
means.
clarify that. Absolutely, absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that's understood. Testing, that's definitely been a hot topic with the changes that occurred and people, raising the THC levels. We're just trying to grow really good quality weed.
Yep.
And focusing on, ideally, yeah, we want to stay in the 27 to 32% THC is where we like to be, and the genetics that we choose, and that really goes into our growing techniques as well. And so when they did change the lab testing rules, we didn't actually see too much of a change, where I think a lot of people did see kind of a 6% reduction in where they were.
Some of that roller coaster effect
Yeah.
with some of these groups.
But we still, we're a health and wellness brand, so we still grow CBD
Yep.
strains as well, and we have consumers that really appreciate also lower percentages. They don't.
Absolutely.
It's gotten too high for them. But we try to really meet the consumer in that range of the 20 to 35% range.
And back to the zero pesticides, pesticide free, more layers to add into that. What does that realistically mean for people when they see a jar, when they see something saying that, or even when a bud tender is saying that? What is the real value of some of the things that we're seeing in that, or what does that bring clarity to that if you can?
Well, just kind of going back to organic pesticides, certainly better than conventional pesticides. But again, you're smoking. You don't have the opportunity to wash it. So, these soaps and essential oils can become toxic when you're inhaling them. And for someone that is smoking all day long, or someone with a medical condition, this is a big problem. And luckily, the LA Times, even with all its flaws, has really brought this conversation out, and people are starting to listen and really pay attention to pesticides. Now, I think the focus is more on conventional, or ones that are sneaking in there, or people using too much. But I really want to bring the focus on organic as well, and the potential of those issues as well, because we are inhaling this product. And I do get very frustrated, I will be very honest, when I see people saying, oh yeah, we're pesticide free. And I'm like, no, I see your spray sign every single week. You are not pesticide free. You still have a spray report. Zero pesticides is a completely different thing.
We love the retailers, we love the bud tenders, we love the culture of cannabis, but there's still a lot of misinformation out there because of just an overall lack of education, lack of resources on training. And so it'd be dope to be able to see that kind of stuff get clarified more. Understanding what truly is pesticide, what truly is safe or not safe is huge. What are your thoughts on the testing stuff that we've been dealing with the last year here in California, and whether that's impacted CBX or whether you've noticed a shift in demand, or what are your thoughts there? And
Yeah, thankfully it hasn't really impacted us, but that's kind of, when we hunt genetics, we really try to, the first barometer obviously is those aesthetic qualities that we talked about, and going through that kind of 7-factor test. But then after that, we do take a lab test. We're very close with Santa Cruz Labs. Alec, one of the founders, was one of my buddies that used to work at Santa Cruz Hydro when I had grow ops up in Boulder Creek years and years and years ago. But in general, we really break down the terp percentage. So we're always trying to get strains that are testing as close to 3 to 4% total terpenes.
Yep.
And then we want to hunt within that. Like, when you look at like most of the strains out there in the hybrids, it's like the same 3: myrcene, caryophyllene, limonene, over and over again. So we love seeing those hits for those like high amounts of the rare stuff, like osmine, humulene, things like that.
Yep.
And then that also catches our attention in terms of something that's worthy to make the lineup. And I think when it comes to the labs, it's multi-layered. I think it relies on the brands and the brand owners and operators to not be naive, and obviously go with the labs that have experience and are doing things ethically and know what they're doing, right? And so I think that's step one. And the only other factor that really plays in for us, and that's because of our overall kind of business model and brand philosophy is the turnaround time, right? So we are, in this space, we really at home base compare ourselves to what we like to always encompass the ethos of like a really hot bakery, right? Like when you buy Cannabiotics, you're getting fresh bread, right? It's not like we're sitting on a bunch of stuff
From yesterday.
from
Yesterday's
yesterday,
sandwiches.
and I'm going to sell you 5-day-old stale donuts, right?
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me. Again, $60 to $65 an eighth, even if we're going down to $40 to $45 an eighth. For
Absolutely.
a 20% discount, nobody's buying stale bread
No.
ever, right? So in our eyes, right, our entire system relies on forming the whole flavor lineup, from harvesting a room with a portion of that lineup every 5 days, as opposed to harvesting and monocropping a whole room of a flavor and waiting another 2 months.
Yep.
And then fortunately, because we have such a kick-ass team and great continuity and everybody that's passionate about taking pride in their work and growing that elite 11 out of 10 quality, we have a tremendous client base and fan base where the churn rate and the reorders fall directly into the system, right? So if you go out there and go to any of the 600 dispensaries that we service, you'll find it rare, especially in SoCal, where you'll find any jar with the green top that's 2 to 3 weeks old from harvest,
Absolutely.
right? And for us, that is critical. Meaning that is
that seems to be a core principle with you
Same.
guys. I've heard that
100%.
for a while with y'all.
Yeah. And so I think that's our duty to get fresh bread to our clients that put faith in us and slot us up on the premium shelf, right? So I think that's just the one little ancillary sprinkle that plays into our decision. And then, we do a ton of R&D testing. It's not just about testing the lot, right? R&D test is upkeep, right? R&D tests throughout your canopies. If there's a power outage and you think something weird might have happened and that breach of homeostasis, bust out some R&D tests. See what's going on.
Absolutely.
And I think that's another way that you can kind of hone things in, again, with your practices and make sure you're not introducing a problem.
You guys, we've gone over a lot of really good information today. I just got flagged about 5 minutes ago, about 10 minutes left. And so I just want to take the opportunity to make some noise, to just give it up for Autumn and Neema today. I am honored to be doing this. I'm not from California, so to be on stage with two truly what I would describe as just legendary brands, people that helped build this adult use market, it's really cool. I was so nervous before this, and sitting up here just doing what I do, it's been learning. And so I appreciate you guys for doing this with me and rocking with us. Autumn, it's been 5 years since we did stuff with both you guys, so it's really cool to be here with you guys.
Really nice meeting you all.
Likewise,
And good to see you again, Joey.
You as well, man.
Thank you for having us.
We wanted to take a moment to give up some questions. We don't usually have this kind of access to such people. They're in the grows, they're grinding, they're taking orders and stuff. So if there's anybody that has a question that they just got to get off their chest, wanted to at least give you the opportunity to raise your hand. I'll run down there if I got to. But if anybody has anything, I was told to try to give you all the opportunity. Anybody, anything? Any retailers out there that want to ask? Anybody want to place an order? Buyers? We're not taking minimum orders. We're only taking certain sizes. Come on. Let's go. All right. Well, thank you guys again for for attending. I'm Joey from RespectMyRegion.com. This is Autumn Shelton of Autumn Brands and Neema of Cannabiotics. Enjoy the rest of your day, and chase them down if you guys want to place an order. Let's get it. We're Hall of Flowers. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us, and thank you for listening.
Yes.
And come to the after party.